Hi, this is Amin Husain and Nitasha Dillon, and we're part of MTL Collective, um, the core group that facilitates Decolonize This Place. And we're talking to you out of New York City. Um, we're just going to record a short message, and our prompt was to reflect on what does it mean to decolonize the Venice Biennial, or what does it mean to make art, or can think of the art world and museums during this pandemic and post-pandemic. I think that in the interest of time, what we want to say is that we have done many actions in the city, but we really think of ourselves as artists, as organizers. And we blend research, actions, organizing, aesthetics as part of the practice in the training of freedom, in the practice and the training of freedom. Things that you may have been familiar with are actions and organizing we've done around the Guggenheim Museum in New York in relation to migrant workers in Abu Dhabi. We've also done actions at the American Museum of Natural History, thinking about respecting the ancestors, renaming the day from Columbus Day to Indigenous Peoples Day, and the removal of a racist statue. We've also organized to remove Warren Kanders from the board of the Whitney Museum, and we've taken action against the Brooklyn Museum. All of these actions are really kind of outstanding as files because none of these museums have really gotten or taken on decolonization as a process. And the point that I'm trying to make before I pass it on to Nitasha and then we can share a few more thoughts is that decolonization, first of all, is a process. And when we think of decolonization, we're not thinking of decolonizing this museum or this institution. We're thinking of decolonization in terms of unsettling everything. The neoliberalism, the capitalism, the imperialism, and trying to develop new institutions, new ways of living, really kind of thinking of Fanon. And it just so happens that one of our sites of struggle are museums because we do consider ourselves, among other things, as artists or engaged in art.
Just to add on to that, for us, decolonization is also a much more structural response to the ongoing crisis. I think that the pandemic, of course, it has changed the trajectory of where we're at. But the pandemic has also continued to impact the same majority of people. Doesn't matter where we are in the world, like be it in Punjab or be it in New York. You've seen structural inequalities or oppression that already existed being just hyped up from this pandemic. So for us, decolonization is not just about handling a crisis, but it's a structural response to what's going on in the world. Specifically because it is tied to histories of colonization that, of course, Europe is centrally tied to, and what decolonization means, then for the Venice Biennial really means to unsettle its whole power in terms of what it has as an art institution or as an art, the power that it holds in terms of what art means for us today. And so in terms of thinking about that, I mean, if we were to really imagine, does it even look like an exhibition? Do we need galleries? Do we need these national pavilions when most of these nation states have been drawn, based on colonial borders? And so I think that the term decolonization, we were asked, like, what does it mean apart from being a hype? It really means unsettling from the ground up. Wherever we are, whatever, block by block, small piece of land, really understanding the histories of colonization that exist over there and then practicing from that place. Another thing I think that's really important to understand is that decolonization is also now getting, crossed between diversity. This is especially for, Western institutions where they have been predominantly white for, forever, and now they're like, okay, we need more curators of color, or we need more artists of color. But the point is that they're still coming into a system that's colonial or settler. So it's not about having diversity or fixing the current system. It's really looking at it from the ground up and seeing what is its power, what does it hold, be it in the collections, or how has it defined art. And I mean, with the Venice Biennial specifically, so much of it is based on nation states and the artist of the nation. And in today's world right now, with the refugee crisis that's always there, and in general with everything that's going on, do we really need to think in the context of nation states? And I think that's also a really important point. Yeah.
People often ask us, it's like, well, it's better to have these institutions than to not have them. And we often respond, better for whom? I think that when we're thinking about decolonization, we're also thinking about class struggle. And we're recognizing that there is nothing on the front end of the museum that they can do in terms of what art they recognize, what do they decide to take and put into the market. They're still serving capitalism. And I think that for us, we're trying to say that institutions have always been colonial and they always kind of serve the nation state, which is carceral in its nature. This is not to say that we're not engaged or not part of the problem. There is no outside. But recognizing that there is no outside, we also have agency and a responsibility to act. And in that sense, we think of the Whitney, we think of the Brooklyn Museum, we think of all these places, including the Venice Biennale, as faced with a choice. They're either on the choice of people in the pursuit of justice and the pursuit of decolonization and a sharing of control and a democratization of the workplace and becoming anti-racist. There is no neutral institution. There is no neutral museum. We don't need curators. We need to think about what does it mean to act with care, to have shelter, to serve people, for people to actually acknowledge these places as places that are hospitable to their living, to their livelihood, to their well being. And I think that in that regard, we don't know of an institution that is thinking that way or whether they are succeeding. To the extent that these institutions have good people, they're good people doing jobs. And their job is limited by who sits on the board, where does the money come from. And if anyone wants to be afraid of the pandemic in relation to art, they should consider where is money going to come from. And it's probably going to come from bad places. They're already coming from bad places, but probably worse places. And they're going to dictate what aesthetics and what is recognition and what is in the market. And that's going to be further silencing of artists who maybe want to do work around Palestine, work around liberation, work around living and breathing. So, it's not about decolonizing the Venice Biennial. It's either the Venice Biennial is on the side of the people or they can go fuck themselves. And I think every person has that choice to make. And they don't need to tell us there's a plurality of opinion on this. We know what these institutions do. So then the question is, what are we going to do in that regard? And what are people that are engaged with these institutions going to do? Now, there is no one act that can be taken, and there is no purity involved, but there is a struggle. And it's not enough to just have conversations about it.
I'll just end with saying that art can really be a space for sanctuary right now, especially with the chaos that's around us. Art, can be a place for training and practice and freedom. Art can be a place where liberation is practiced and imagined. And I think that's what we need to open up as all these with fascism and everything, as more spaces shut down. Art can really be the place where we can all take refuge.
Thank you.